Monday makeup lesson, we're going to focus on how to apply eyeliner. This particular technique will work with any eye makeup look that you create, and it will also work with your eye shape. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the shaping that we want to create with this particular look. All we really want to do is to deepen and darken the roots of the lashes, following the natural curve and shape of the lid, allowing it to be slightly tapered on the inner corner and also towards the outer corner. And you want to stop and start this line where the lashes stop and start. This is really about creating the illusion of definition rather than actually applying eyeliner. So here are some of my favorite tips. First thing is having a good mirror, and I would recommend using one that's magnifying and also non-magnifying. If you use magnifying mirror, you can often create the wrong shaping, so make sure you're flipping over and back to see what it looks like up close and far away. Next thing is to rest your elbow on something for a little bit of support. This is particularly for people who have unsteady hands, and this will make a massive difference. And you can also use your pinky for support. This will make sure to get rid of too much of that little shake that you might have. A couple of different ways that you can do it. You can use your fingertip on your pinky and rest this on your cheek. Or if you're left-handed or working on the other eye, you might need to switch your hand around and rest your pinky at the side. Either way, using your pinky for support will create a smoother line. Before you apply anything, I want you to get used to creating little strokes. So don't touch the skin and just practice a few little strokes working across the lash line in order for you to know the actual shaping that you're creating. Now, if you're using felt tip liner, one thing I like to do is take a plastic lid and just squash it down ever so slightly to make sure it's fully saturated in the inky black liner. And now let's get started with the application. I always like to start in the middle, so right in the middle of the lash line, and then we're going to be working outward. So ignore the inner corner for now, focus on the center and blend outwards. And you want to try to keep the liner as horizontal as you can against the skin, using that pinky for support. Work your way across. And we're going to continue the line, moving it slightly outwards. And this time I'm going to fold my pinky underneath. This will just allow me to get a little closer access to the outer corner of the lid. Now you can also switch your hand around and pull the liner in the opposite direction from the outer edge in to meet the center. This is a nice way to get that smooth line. Now when you're working on the inner corner, you want to make sure that it's a really thin line compared to everything else that you've done. A nice little technique for this is just to keep it a little higher so it's dropping lower across the lash line. This will just make sure you don't get a really thick line. And you want to start where the lashes start. Don't bring it right to the inner corner. Focus mostly on the lashes. And keep this line nice and thin. And there you go. This is almost an invisible eyeliner look. You can make it as thick or as thin as you want, but it looks great with so many different eye makeup looks because it creates definition. Now you might possibly make a little bit of an oopsie. My phone actually beeped, so that's why I did this. And I thought that I would show you guys how to fix this up without having to start all over again. So I'm going to be using a lip brush and also a dry Q-tip, and I've put a little bit of makeup remover on the lip brush. What we're going to do is basically paint over the top of the mistake, and this will just break down that liner for you and lift it away. Depending on how much of an oopsie that you did make, you might want to have a tissue handy just to clean off the lip brush, add a little bit more of that eye makeup remover, and then repeat as many times as you want. You just want to make sure it doesn't get too wet, and that's why keeping a dry Q-tip is really important, just to remove any excess. And try to avoid makeup removers that are too oily because that will just get onto your lid and wreck everything else. Use a water-based one. Now you can see that the lid is a little bit gray looking, so what we're going to do is we're going to reapply our base and our shadow. Unfortunately, some liners can actually stain the lids and it can be very difficult without fully removing it. So what I actually like to do is take a little bit of a shimmering eyeshadow to cover up any mistakes because this will reflect the light for you. And there you go. That is the finished look. Just add some mascara and your lashes are going to look really thick. Or you can apply some falsies and they're going to blend really nicely. Either way, this invisible eyeliner technique is perfect for beginners. So give it a try. I want you guys to master this and then we'll move on to doing wings later. Today I'm going to show you guys how to create this look using this Wet n Wild palette called Silent Treatment. I love these palettes because they're so easy to use. They're nice and small. They're really inexpensive. They actually have little descriptions on the shadow to indicate where you should apply them. However, I do think they're a little different, so let me explain. So I'm going to start off with the blending brush, and we are going to take the shade, which is a transition shade. So I often refer to a transition shade as the mid-tone. It's basically creating a transition between your other shadows. That's why I call it a mid-tone, because it's like a middle tone, so it's somewhere in between everything that you're applying. So this is a beautiful sort of mauve-y, almost like a blushy kind of tone. I really like it with this look. And transition shades typically go in the crease area. So the crease area is where the lid creases into the eye shape, but it actually refers to anything above this point, but stopping underneath the brow. And you want it to be nice and soft and blended. That's why you use a blending brush. We're then going to take the shade, which is for the eyelid, and we're going to use a smaller brush. And the reason we're using a smaller one is we want to intensify this. So we're going to apply this all over the lid area. So this is basically going to go from the lash line up towards the transition shade or the mid-tone in the crease. So apply this evenly across the lid, matching up to where the mid-tone starts. Don't go beyond that point. Keep this to the lid, but just get to the very edge where the mid-tone or transition shade starts. You're then going to take what they refer to as the crease shade. Personally, I wouldn't use this in the crease. You could if you wanted to deepen the crease, but I want to use this on the outer edge, and I want to use it as a definer or as my contour. So we're going to apply this on the outer third of the lid, and I'm using a flat brush to give me lots of control. But once I've applied it on the outer third, I then take a soft pencil brush and just soften it out. This is actually the same brush that we use to apply the lid shade. That way you bring everything in together. Then we're going to take that crease shade again, and this time we're going to apply this underneath the eye. So I'm going to use that flat brush again and apply this underneath on the outer third. And with that pencil brush that we used before, we're going to soften this out. Really important to keep everything nice and soft and blended. Next, we're taking the brow bone shade, which is the lightest shade, and we're going to apply this with a lip brush or a small detailed brush and apply this underneath the brows. And this will sharpen up the look. The brow bone actually creates a much sharper look because it creates that contrast between what's going on in the crease and the lid. And you can also use this shade on the inner corner, the center of the lid, basically anywhere you want to slightly brighten. And then all you have to do is apply maybe a little bit of liner, lashes, lots of mascara, and you're good to go. I love the cool tones in this palette. It's really easy to use. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you have, for today's Monday makeup lesson, I'm going to show you how to create a classic smoky eye. It's one of those looks that looks so good on so many people, and I have lots of tips and tricks to show you guys to make sure it works perfectly for you. So let's get started. The first step to a perfect smoky eye is to make sure you're priming the lids, and you can use eyeshadow primer or concealer, but what you really want to make sure you're completely covering the lid from the lash line up to the brows to create a blank canvas. This is to disguise any discoloration that we might naturally have on our lids and also give the eyeshadow something to hold on to. So you actually want to leave your eyeshadow primer or concealer just a little sticky. This will actually grab hold of the shadow. However, I do have a little trick to make sure you also get a good blend, so we'll get to that in a second. With any eye makeup look, the main areas of the eye would be the crease area, and the crease area is really important in a smoky eye. If you think of what smoke is, it's that deep dark color that then fades into nothing, and the crease area is where that fading into nothing happens. The crease area is basically where the lid creases into the eye shape, but it stops just underneath the brow bone. And of course, you have the lid as well. And for a smoky eye, I actually divide the lid into an upper and a lower part. Now, as far as eyeshadows go, I've created a little smoky palette for us, and you want to adapt this to work with your own skin tone. So the first shade is what I refer to as the base shade. So this is very similar to your own skin tone, could be a little lighter. We then have our contour shade. This should be a few shades darker than your own skin tone. And then you have your mid-tone, and your mid-tone is probably the most important. A lot of people refer to this as the transition shade. This is somewhere in between the base and the contour. That's why I call it a mid-tone, because it's a middle tone. And then we have our smoky shadow. So our smoky shade is basically whatever type of smoky eye that you want to create. I'm going to create a black one. So let's get started with this look, taking a blending brush and our base shade. And this is my little trick to get that perfect blend. We're basically going to start at the crease of the eye and then work up underneath the brows. So you want to pack on this base shade to create a silky powdery effect, but avoid the lid. We want the lid to stay a little tacky from the concealer and the primer, but we want that crease to be really powdery, really easy to blend over. By applying that powder, we're basically going to create an easier, softer blend. Remember how I said concealer and primer gives the shadow something to hold on to? Well, this powdery base will make sure we have something to blend over, and that's how you get that perfect soft blend. Just make sure to avoid the lid, don't come down too far, keep it from the crease right up to the brows. For the next step, we're going to keep with that same blending brush, and I haven't cleaned it off, and we're going to go in with our mid-tone, so our middle tone or our transition shade. And we're going to start over everything that we've already applied, but we're going to stop under the brow bone. So the first shadow went from the crease right up underneath the brows, avoiding the lid. And use this little diagram as a representation of what we're doing here. We're starting in this crease area and then softly blending upwards. If you're not sure where to stop and start your blend, you basically want to keep it in between these two parallel points. It looks really complicated, but it's basically using the edge of your eye, nose, and brow on one side and then creating a parallel line on the inner corner. If you blend outside the lines, don't worry because you can always clean up at the end. Just use this as a guide. Then we're going to take a clean blending brush, and I always keep a clean blending brush handy for every look, but in particular when you're doing a smoky eye. Go over everything that you've applied to soften out any harsh lines. No additional product needed, just soften out those lines. Now we're going to move on to applying the contour, and I need you guys to take a brush that's got a lot of control in it. So maybe a flat brush or a pencil brush or a brush like this, which is somewhere in between. It's one of my favorites. And picking up a little bit of that contour shade, which is one of the darker shades from this palette, we're going to apply this all over the lid area. So I want you guys to keep this just to the lid, bringing it up to where that mid-tone starts in the crease, but don't go beyond that point. Really focus on the roots of the lashes and softly blend this over and back, covering the lid. Try to avoid blending this up too high because that can ruin the look. You want to keep it nice and deep and low. So what we're going to end up with is a deep dark look right at the roots of the lashes that then fades upwards, fading into that mid-tone, into that crease and up underneath the brows. Next, I want you to take a small flat brush, something that you have the most control over. And I want you to take your smoky shadow. So whatever smoky shadow that you're using, I'm using black. And there's two ways that you can apply this. You can bring your hand down onto the lash line, or you can come at it straight on. As you can see, my hand is pretty much at the level of my nose as I'm applying this. I'm applying it using the lash roots as my guide, and follow the natural shape of your lash line. If you have your hand too low at this point, you're going to blend that black up too far. And I don't want you guys to do that. So try to keep it at around the cheek level, or bring your hand over the top and press downwards onto the lash line. Either way, just imagine that you're creating a liner look. Just coat right by those lashes and really pack it on there. Get in between those lashes, right onto that lash line. It's really important. We have to imagine that that black is coming from somewhere, so it has to start really dark at the base. Now for shaping wise, I like to have it slightly thicker just in the center. It's almost like an oval shape. This will create that classic round shape that you get with a smoky eye. So it's slightly tapered on the inside and the outside and highest in the middle. Before you go any further, what I want you to do is take your fingertip and really press on that pigment. Push it right at those lashes. No smudging, no blending. Just pushing that on there. This will remove any fallout while also making sure we're really packing that pigment right at the roots of the lashes. Once you've done that, you can then take your small blending brush or a pencil brush and softly and lightly smudge this out. Watch for your hand placement here. What I want you guys to remember is that if your hand is low, your blend will be high. And that's good at the start because we want to bring that black from the roots of the lashes upwards to about the halfway point of the lid. But if you keep your hand this low throughout the entire smudging process, you're going to end up pushing it up too high. Bring that brush slightly upwards. As you start to smudge, regain control over that brush and very softly sweep over and back. And this will prevent you from blending it up too high. You do not want it to surpass the lid and get into that crease area. Depending on the look that you're doing, of course, but particularly for a classic smoky eye. Keeping it nice and low by the lashes is the best way to get that classic look. I usually split the lid into two sections, so I have a lower part and an upper part. I'm making it sound really complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. But if you learn these techniques, it will become easier, even though it sounds like I'm making it harder than it is. The next step is really important, and it's to really darken in between the lashes. So apply a pencil liner on your waterline, which is the upper tight line of your lid. What I like to do is just look down in a mirror and just kind of push upwards between the lashes. This will create that dark smoky look. You have to imagine where this smoky depth is coming from, and it should be coming right between the lashes. So try getting that pencil right in there. Another important thing is to coat those lashes. I actually brush my lashes downwards to make sure it's really dark right at the roots. Once again, to create the illusion of the depth coming from the lash line. Essentially, it looks like we just have really thick lashes. If you want to go an extra step, you can always apply invisible liner. If you watch my videos a lot, you'll know that I've talked about this. It's basically lining very, very thinly right between your lashes, as close as possible. And I also went ahead and applied some falsies. Once again, this creates the illusion of a deep, dark look right at the roots. So that's pretty much all of the work done, but we've still got a lot of work to do. You have to clean up underneath the eyes because keeping it as clean and bright as possible will create that contrast with the smoky eye. So don't neglect doing this. You also want to clean up underneath the brows by taking a little bit of the base shade and a small brush and applying this on the brow bone. We have already applied this, but reapplying it will actually brighten this up. And you can also pop a little bit of this shadow on the inner corner of the eye too. I like to imagine that the smoky eye is coming from my lash line and you don't have lashes right in there. So try brightening it ever so slightly. Finish off with lots of mascara to balance out the top. And there you go. A classic smoky eye. And you can use these techniques to create any number of different looks. But I love that deep dark look starting at the roots of the lashes and blending upwards. If you try out this look, I would love to hear from you guys. You can also send me a picture of how to create a soft glam look, perfect for mature eyes. We're going to start off by prepping with a little bit of concealer. I'd recommend using concealer mixed with an eyeshadow primer, as some eyeshadow primers can be quite drying on mature lids. But prepping the lids in this way will give the eyeshadow something to hold on to while creating a blank canvas for us to work on. I've chosen these 4 eyeshadows to create this look, and I'll talk you through each one that you need. The first one is at least 1 shade lighter than the skin tone, and this will be used as our highlighter or our base. We then have a contour shade, which should be at least 1 shade darker than the skin tone. Then we have our mid-tone or transition shade. This should be somewhere in between our contour and our highlight. And then we have our 4th shade, which is a highlighter. This can have a little bit of shimmer to it and should be about 1 shade lighter than the skin tone. These are just 4 single shadows, but there's lots of different palettes that have this variety, so you can definitely recreate it. As far as brushes go, you're going to need a blending brush, a flat brush, a clean blending brush, which I'll explain a little bit later, and also a smaller brush, just for any detailed work. We're going to start off with the blending brush and our mid-tone. We're going to apply this in the crease of the eye, stopping underneath the brows. Now for mature lids or hooded eyes, you want to make sure that you really work your mid-tone into that hooded area. This will help to camouflage it, recede it, and create a soft, blurry finish. If you're working on yourself, try keeping your eyes open. This will allow you to see the shape that you're creating. You really just want to focus on this area just above the lid. This will help to recede any hoodedness and soften the look. We're then going to take the smaller brush and we're going to take the contour shade. We're going to work this on the outer edge of the eye and deep into the socket. You want to keep this nice and low. Your midtone is always higher than your contour. So keep it underneath this line, working on the outer edge of the lid. You also want to make sure you're keeping within the lines. Don't worry if you've gone outside them because you can always clean it up afterwards. But using the edge of the nose, eye, and brow as a guide, you want to blend in from this point. This will just make sure you get that nice, soft, lifted appearance. We're then going to take the clean blending brush. What we're going to do is blend over everything that we've already applied. This will soften out any harsh lines. And you're not going to apply any eyeshadows with this, you're just blending with whatever's already there. By using a clean blending brush, you're going to stop that muddy appearance that can happen. Try holding the brush really far down the handle and just softly sweep over everything. We're then going to take the flat brush and we're going to take the highlighter shade and apply this on the inner corner of the eye and softly sweep it to about the halfway point of the lid. Try to keep this nice and low. You don't want to touch the crease with this. Everything else on the lid is kept quite matte, and this is just to add a little bit of shine. Sticking with that same flat brush, we're also going to take the matte shade and we're going to apply this underneath the brows. This will just add a little bit of definition, and you can also apply it over the top of the highlight to soften any of that really harsh highlighted effect. This will give you that really blurry effect, which is perfect for mature lids. I then finish off by cleaning up on the outer edge of the eye with concealer. This will give a lifted appearance to the eye.